My daughter said I needed a guardian. Then my doctor read her emails. The first time my daughter told a room full of strangers that I could no longer make my own decisions, she did not look at me. She looked at the probate judge. Her name was Laura Bennett, and she was my only child. She stood 3 seats away in a navy dress I had helped her buy for a job interview years before, holding a folder thick enough to make me feel as if my whole life had been reduced to paperwork. "Mom gets confused," she said softly. "She forgets appointments, misplaces bills, and becomes upset when anyone tries to help her. I'm only asking the court to appoint a guardian until she's safe." Safe. That was the word she used while asking for control over my pension, my savings, my medical choices, and the little brick house in Willow Creek that my husband William and I had spent 36 years paying for. My attorney leaned toward me and whispered, "Rebecca, don't react. Let her keep talking." I wanted to ask Laura how she could say those things with the same mouth that had once called me at 2 in the morning because she was scared of thunder. I wanted to ask why she had brought up the arthritis in my hands, but not the fact that I still volunteered at the Willow Creek Library twice a week, managed my own bills, drove myself to church, and remembered every birthday in our family. But before I could speak, the courtroom door opened. Dr. Alan Mercer, my primary care physician for nearly 14 years, stepped inside, carrying a sealed envelope. He looked pale, not confused, angry. "Your Honor," he said, "before this hearing goes any further, I need the court to see what Ms. Bennett asked my clinic to place in her mother's medical record." Laura turned so quickly that her folder slipped against the chair, and in that moment, I understood something that changed the way I saw my daughter forever. This was not concern. It was a plan. If you believe dignity does not disappear with age, subscribe to this channel, like this story, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if someone you loved tried to make the world believe you could no longer speak for yourself? 3 months earlier, I still believed Laura was trying to help me. That is the part that hurts to admit. I was 68 years old, widowed for 6 years, and living in the same 2-bedroom home on Maple Avenue where William and I had raised Laura. Our house was not grand. It had an old front porch with a white railing that needed repainting every spring, a small backyard where William had grown tomatoes, and a kitchen window above the sink that looked out toward the bird feeder. But it was ours. William used to say that every room carried a piece of our life. The dent in the hallway wall came from the year Laura tried to roller skate indoors. The faded spot near the dining room table came from the Christmas tree stand that leaked water in 1998. The shelf over the fireplace had been built by William's own hands after he retired from the maintenance department at the county courthouse. When he died, I did not sell the house because I could not bear the thought of someone else painting over all those memories. I stayed because I was still capable of staying. I had my monthly pension from the library system, Social Security, and the savings William and I had built little by little. There was no fortune hidden in a safe, no glamorous inheritance, just a retirement account, a modest emergency fund, and a paid-off house worth more than either of us had imagined when we bought it. Enough to live quietly. Enough, apparently, to tempt someone who knew exactly what I had. Laura had not always been cruel. For most of her life, she had been bright, funny, and restless. She was the kind of child who made friends in grocery store lines and asked too many questions at school. As an adult, she became a pharmaceutical sales representative. She wore heels that clicked across my hardwood floors and carried a phone that never stopped buzzing. She had also made choices that kept catching up with her. There had been a marriage that ended badly, a townhouse she bought during a housing boom and sold at a loss, credit cards she once promised she had under control, a small online boutique that had seemed exciting for 6 months, then disappeared without explanation. I knew she struggled sometimes. But I did not believe struggle made her dishonest. Not at first. The first warning came disguised as affection. Laura began calling more often after I had a minor fall in the garden. I had tripped over the hose while trying to move a planter. I bruised my hip and spent one night at Willow Creek Medical Center while they made sure nothing was broken. The next morning, Laura arrived with flowers, a bag of clean clothes, and an expression so frightened that I apologized for scaring her. "Mom, you can't keep doing everything alone," she said. I was watering basil. Laura, I wasn't climbing a mountain. That's exactly what worries me. You always minimize things. I remember smiling at her. That must be where you get it. She did not smile back. After I came home, she began stopping by without calling first. At first, I welcomed it. She brought soup from a deli near her office and helped me carry laundry downstairs. She replaced a burnt-out porch light and fixed the loose handle on my kitchen cabinet. Then she started asking questions. "Where do you keep your tax papers?" "In the filing cabinet." "Do you have a list of all your accounts?" "Yes." "What happens if you end up in the hospital again?" "I call you, and you bring me a book I've already read." She laughed, but she kept looking at the filing cabinet. One afternoon, she was standing at my kitchen counter when she asked, "Have you ever thought about putting me on your bank account? Just in case?" I was rinsing blueberries in a colander. I have a power of attorney in my estate folder. It only applies if I'm unable to make decisions. Well, maybe it should be easier than that. Easier for whom? She looked at me then, and something hard flickered behind her eyes before it disappeared. "For you, Mom." I did not argue. I simply told her I would speak to my attorney if I ever felt I needed to update anything. That answer should have been enough. Instead, Laura began acting as though I had rejected her. For 2 weeks, she barely called. When she did, her voice had a sharpness I had heard before. Usually when life had disappointed her, and she wanted someone else to blame. Then came the appointment mix-up. I had a routine checkup scheduled with Dr. A.S. Mercer on a Tuesday morning. I had written it on the calendar by the refrigerator, entered it into my phone, and placed the appointment card beside my purse. I was not likely to forget it. But on Monday evening, I received a call from Laura. "Mom, why aren't you at the clinic?" I looked at the clock. "Because my appointment is tomorrow." "No, it was today. I talked to someone there." "That can't be right." "You're doing it again," she said quietly. "Doing what?" "Getting defensive instead of admitting you forgot." I checked the card. Tuesday, 10:30 in the morning. Laura. It says, tomorrow. She paused for just a second too long. "Well, maybe they changed it. You should call them." I did call them. The receptionist, a woman named Denise, whom I had known for years, sounded confused. "Mrs. Clark, your appointment is tomorrow," she said. "No changes." "Did my daughter call?" There was another pause. "Yes," Denise said carefully. "She called earlier and asked whether you had missed an appointment recently. I told her I couldn't discuss your records without permission." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Did she say why she was asking? She said she was concerned you were becoming forgetful. I thanked Denise and hung up. For several minutes, I stood in my kitchen holding the phone. The blueberries were still sitting in the sink. Water had pooled around the colander. Outside, a cardinal landed on the feeder, bright red against the gray afternoon. I kept thinking, forgetful. It was such a small word, almost harmless, but it had not come from me. It had come from my daughter, sent ahead of me into a place where people wrote things down. That evening, Laura arrived at my house as if nothing had happened. She walked in, carrying a grocery bag. I brought chicken and rice. You need to eat something besides toast. I had toast once this week. Mom, I'm trying to help. I stood beside the kitchen table and looked at her. Why did you call Dr. Mercer's office and tell them I was forgetting appointments? Her face changed, but only slightly. A quick tightening around the mouth. I didn't tell them anything. I asked a question. You told them you were concerned about my memory. Because I am. You told me I missed an appointment that did not exist. Laura set the grocery bag down too hard. A carton of eggs shifted inside it. I was worried. Is that a crime now? No, I said. But lying to me is not concern. She crossed her arms. You see, this is what I mean. You get paranoid whenever someone brings up reality. I had spent my working life helping patrons at the library find information. I had watched people search for birth records, property maps, newspaper articles, old photographs, even court filings. Information had taught me something simple. When someone is telling the truth, the details usually become clearer over time. When someone is trying to control the story, the details become foggy. Laura's details were foggy. She said she had only called because she loved me. She said I was taking everything the wrong way. She said maybe grief had made me more suspicious since William died. That last sentence hurt more than I let her see. William had been gone 6 years. I had cried enough tears to fill the Ohio River. But I was not broken. I still knew the difference between a daughter's worried voice and a daughter laying the first stone in a path she hoped I would not notice. I need you to leave, I said. Her eyes widened. You're throwing me out? I'm asking you to leave my home for tonight. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her bag and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. You're going to regret making me your enemy. Mom. The words hung in the room after she left. I wish I could tell you that I immediately called a lawyer. I wish I could tell you I understood exactly what was happening and moved with perfect courage. I did not. I sat at my kitchen table and cried. Not because I was afraid Laura would hurt me. Not yet. I cried because every mother carries a private hope that her child will someday understand the sacrifices she made. Not praise them. Not repay them. Just understand them. I thought of the years William and I had skipped vacations so Laura could attend summer programs. I thought of the evening shifts I worked at the library after my regular hours so we could help with her college tuition. I thought of the first time she called me Mommy after a nightmare. I had spent so much of my life protecting her from disappointment that I had failed to recognize when she became willing to use my love against me. The next morning, I went to my appointment with Dr. Mercer. He was a calm man in his early 60s, with silver hair, kind eyes, and the habit of folding his hands before he said anything important. He had treated William during his final illness. He had seen me through the months after my husband's death, when I could not sleep and forgot to eat dinner unless someone reminded me. He knew the difference between grief and confusion. After checking my blood pressure, he pulled his rolling stool closer. Rebecca, he said, I understand there may be some tension between you and Laura. I nodded. She called the office. She did. What did she say? He looked toward the closed door, then back at me. I can't share anything that belongs in another person's private communication without the proper process. But I can tell you this, your daughter has contacted the clinic more than once. More than once? Yes. A heaviness settled in my chest. What did she want? She repeatedly asked staff to observe and document signs that you might be cognitively impaired. I stared at him. Observe me? She asked whether you had seemed disoriented, whether you had forgotten information, whether you appeared overly emotional when discussing finances. My fingers went cold around the edge of the examination table. Did she say I was confused about money? Doctor, Mercer did not answer right away. That was answer enough. Rebecca, he said gently. Have you noticed unusual activity in your accounts? New forms? Mail you did not request? Anyone asking you to sign something? I thought of Laura's questions about my bank accounts, her attention to the filing cabinet, her false appointment, her anger when I asked her to leave. Then I remembered something I had ignored the week before. A large white envelope had arrived from the Franklin County Probate Court. I had assumed it was junk mail because I had never had business there. The return address had looked official, but the envelope had been placed on the side table beneath a stack of grocery flyers. I had not opened it. My heart began to pound. It may be nothing, Doctor, Mercer said, but I want you to look through your mail carefully, and I want you to consider speaking with an elder law attorney. When I got home, I found the envelope exactly where I had left it. My name was printed across the front. Rebecca Clark. No middle initial. No, Mrs. No friendly note from a neighbor or insurance company. Just my name and a case number. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a notice of a petition. Laura Bennett had filed paperwork asking the court to appoint her as my legal guardian. And attached to that petition was a statement claiming I was unable to manage my own retirement income, medical care, property, or daily affairs. The hearing was scheduled for 21 days later. At the bottom of the last page, under the words, petitioner, was my daughter's signature. I read it 3 times before I could breathe. Then I saw the list of supporting evidence. It included observations from medical providers, and beneath that line, there was a name I recognized. Dr. Alan Mercer. I sat alone in my kitchen with that paper in my lap, listening to the refrigerator hum. Laura had not just called my doctor's office. She had been trying to turn my doctor into proof that I no longer belonged to myself. I did not sleep that night. I sat in William's old armchair with the probate papers spread across the coffee table, reading the same sentences until the words began to lose their shape. Alleged incapacitated person. That was how the petition described me. Not Rebecca. Not Mrs. Clark. Not the woman who had worked for 30 years. Paid every bill on time. Cared for a husband through cancer. And raised the daughter now, asking a court to take over my life. An alleged incapacitated person. There was something cold about seeing yourself described that way. It made me understand why people can be frightened into silence. Once someone starts telling the world that you are confused, every emotion you have becomes evidence against you. If you cry, they say you are unstable. If you get angry, they say you are irrational. If you defend yourself too strongly, they say you do not understand your own condition. Laura had chosen a trap that gave her a name for every possible reaction I could have. So I decided not to react. I made tea, took out a yellow legal pad, and wrote one sentence at the top. What can I prove? Not what did I feel. Not what did I fear. What could I prove? By morning, the page was full. Laura had lied about my appointment. She had contacted my doctor's office more than once. She had asked about my finances. She had filed for guardianship without telling me. And she had listed Dr. Mercer as supporting evidence even though he had never told me I lacked capacity. The next call I made was to an elder law attorney named Patricia Hale. Mrs. Hale had been recommended by a woman from my church, whose brother had needed help after a nursing home tried to pressure him into signing documents he did not understand. Her office was above a bakery on Main Street, with a narrow staircase, a brass plaque beside the door, and a waiting room that smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon. I expected an attorney's office to feel intimidating. Instead, Patricia Hale offered me a glass of water, set a box of tissues within reach without making a performance of it, and said, Mrs. Clark, start wherever you need to start. So I did. I told her about the fall in my garden, Laura's sudden interest in my accounts, the false appointment, the calls to the clinic, the petition. I handed her every page, including the one that listed Dr. Mercer as a source of medical concern. She read quietly for several minutes. Then she removed her glasses. Rebecca, she said, a guardianship petition is serious, but filing one does not make its claims true. Your daughter has made allegations. The court still needs evidence. What if people believe her? Then we show them the truth in documents, records, and testimony. I looked down at my hands. She's my daughter. Patricia's expression softened, but her voice stayed steady. Yes, and that makes this painful. It does not make it less important. She explained the process carefully. The court would appoint an investigator, sometimes called a court evaluator, to meet with me and assess the situation. The judge could also consider a medical evaluation, financial records, witness testimony, and evidence from both sides. You are entitled to an attorney, Patricia said. You are entitled to oppose the petition, and you are entitled to make decisions about your life unless the court finds clear reason otherwise. The word entitled made my eyes sting. It should not have felt like a gift to hear that I still had rights. But after reading Laura's petition, it did. Patricia asked whether I had recent bank statements. Yes. Tax returns? Yes. Your estate documents? In a locked file box. Any evidence of messages, requests, or changes involving Laura? I thought about it. There was a mail issue? I said, a few weeks ago. I stopped getting paper statements from my retirement account. I assumed they had moved online. Do you use online statements? No. Patricia sat straighter. Did you call them? No. Call them today. Ask whether there has been any change to your mailing address, email address, login information, beneficiary designation, or authorized contact. Do not accuse anyone yet. Just ask for records. Before I left, she gave me a list of things to do. Change the locks on my filing cabinet. Keep my phone with me. Do not sign anything from Laura. Do not meet with her alone. Save every message. And if she arrived at my home angry or demanding access, call someone. Does that mean the police? I asked. It means you do not have to handle intimidation by yourself, Patricia said. You decide, based on what happens. That distinction mattered to me. She was not telling me to turn Laura into a stranger. She was reminding me that being family did not give her permission to frighten me. When I got home, I called my retirement account provider. The young man who answered introduced himself as Marcus. I gave him my account number, passed the security questions, and asked whether any information had been changed recently. There was a pause. Mrs. Clark, he said. I see a request from approximately 5 weeks ago to update the preferred email address on file. My stomach tightened. What email address? He read it slowly. It was Laura's. For a moment, I could not answer. Was it changed? I finally asked. No. Mom? The request did not pass verification. There was also a request to add a trusted contact person, but it was incomplete and not processed. Who made those requests? I can't verify identity beyond the request record, Marcus said, but I can tell you the request came through the online portal, and it included an email address matching the one you just heard. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to place the receiver down on the kitchen table. I thought of Laura standing near my filing cabinet. I thought of the afternoon she had offered to help me organize my password notebook. I had refused because it embarrassed me that my handwriting had become smaller and less neat with age. At the time, she had smiled and said, "You really should keep those things somewhere safer." Now I wondered whether she had been searching for exactly where I kept them. Marcus helped me reset my online login, set up a verbal password that Laura would not know, and place a temporary fraud alert on the account. He also agreed to send me copies of the attempted change requests. "Would you like us to note that a family member may be attempting unauthorized access?" he asked. I stared at the window over my sink. Outside, the maple tree, near the sidewalk, was beginning to turn gold at the edges. William had planted it when Laura was in middle school. He used to joke that by the time it grew tall enough to shade the porch, we would be old enough to need the shade. "Yes," I said quietly. "Please make that note." After I hung up, I cried again. But this time, I did not cry because I felt helpless. I cried because the truth had become more painful and more solid at the same time. That afternoon, Patricia called to tell me she had filed my response to the guardianship petition. She had also requested that the court require a formal independent evaluation rather than relying on Laura's claims about my mental state. "Dr. Mercer has agreed to provide records showing your cognitive screenings have been normal," she said. "Can he do that?" "With your written authorization." "Yes." I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Then Patricia's voice became more serious. "There is one more thing. The petition includes an affidavit signed by your daughter." I saw it. "She claims you told her you could no longer keep track of your accounts." "I never said that." "I assumed as much." "She also claims you became confused during a conversation about a family financial arrangement. Do you know what that might refer to?" "No." But when I hung up, I remembered a sentence Laura had said a month earlier. "You're going to need someone who can make the hard choices soon." At the time, I thought she meant someone to drive me if my hip hurt. Now I understood she may have been talking about herself. 2 days later, the court investigator came to my house. Her name was Celia Grant. She was a middle-aged woman with a leather portfolio, sensible shoes, and a calm manner that made me feel less like I was being examined and more like I was being heard. Still, I knew what was at stake. She could look around my home and decide whether I was capable of living there. She could write a report that might influence whether Laura got control of my life. Celia asked if she could speak with me alone. I said yes. She asked basic questions at first. My date of birth, the current president, my medications, how I paid my bills, what I ate for breakfast, the names of my doctors. Then she asked more difficult questions. "Do you know why your daughter filed this petition?" "Yes," I said. "She says she is worried about me." "And what do you believe?" "I believe she is worried about my money." Celia did not react. "Why do you believe that?" So, I showed her the petition. I showed her the notice from my retirement provider about the attempted email change. I showed her my calendar with the original clinic appointment. I showed her the notes I had started taking after Laura's call. I had written dates, times, and what was said. Nothing dramatic. Nothing exaggerated. September 8. Laura asked where tax papers were. September 13. Laura asked to be added to bank account. September 21. Laura called clinic. Told me wrong. Appointment date. September 22. Denise confirmed appointment had not changed. September 28. Probate petition delivered. Celia read every word. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "your records are very organized." "I worked in a library," I said. "I learned a long time ago that memories can be questioned. Paper is harder to argue with." For the first time, she smiled. Then she asked whether I had anyone else in my life who could speak about my independence. I thought of church friends, my neighbor, Mrs. Dwyer, the librarian who took over after I retired. Dr. Mercer. Then I thought of someone I had not called in years. My younger brother, Thomas. Thomas lived 2 hours away in Dayton. He and Laura had never been close. He had always been the quieter one in the family. The uncle who brought books instead of toys, and listened more than he spoke. I had avoided involving him because I did not want to humiliate Laura. But I was beginning to understand that silence had protected the wrong person. That evening, I called him. "Becky," he answered. "Is everything all right?" The sound of his voice nearly undid me. "No?" I said, "but I'm trying to make it right." I told him the whole story. Thomas did not interrupt. He let me talk until I ran out of words. Finally, he said, "I knew Laura was under pressure, but I didn't know she had gone this far." "What pressure?" There was a pause. "What do you mean?" I asked. Thomas sighed heavily. "Rebecca, I thought you knew. Laura called me in July. She asked if I could lend her money." My heart sank. "For what?" "She said she had fallen behind on something connected to her business. She wouldn't explain much. She said it was temporary." "Did you lend her money?" "No. I offered to help her make a budget." She got angry and hung up. I closed my eyes. "How much did she ask for?" $40,000. $40,000. That was not a late utility bill. It was not a bad month. It was not a small emergency that had gotten out of hand. It was the kind of number that could make a desperate person start looking at someone else's savings as if it belonged to them. The next morning, Patricia asked me to come back to her office. When I arrived, she had several documents spread across the conference table. The retirement company sent the attempted account. "Change records," she said. "They're useful. The requests were not completed, but they establish a pattern." She tapped one page. "There is also something else." She handed me a document titled, "Proposed Care Plan for Rebecca Clerk." My name was at the top. The document claimed that if Laura were appointed guardian, she intended to move me into a safer living arrangement, sell my home, and use the proceeds to fund my long-term care. I read the words slowly. Sell my home? The house where William's tools were still hanging in the garage. The kitchen where Laura had learned to make pancakes. The front porch where I had sat through every autumn since I was 32 years old. "She included this with her petition?" I asked. "Not directly. It was attached to a supplemental filing submitted by her attorney." "My home isn't unsafe." "I know that, and the court investigator will see that too." I looked again at the document. Near the bottom, Laura had written that she planned to manage my assets for the benefit of the ward. Ward. Another word meant to make me smaller. Then I saw something that stopped me cold. Under estimated assets, she had listed the value of my home, my retirement account, and my savings. But beneath those numbers was a projected line for reimbursement of caregiving expenses. The amount was $40,000. The exact amount Thomas said she had asked to borrow. My daughter had not simply wanted authority over me. She had already decided what she intended to pay herself once she had it. Patricia watched my face carefully. "Rebecca," she said, "we need to prepare for the hearing. And we need Dr. Mercer's records. Not just his medical assessment." I understood what she meant. The emails. Laura had tried to use my doctor's office to build a story about my confusion. But somewhere inside that clinic was the record of what she had actually asked them to do. And if Dr. Mercer had been willing to walk into that courtroom with an envelope in his hand, then perhaps he had found something Laura never expected anyone else to read. Dr. Mercer asked me to meet him at the clinic the following afternoon. Patricia came with me. By then, I had learned that fear changes the meaning of ordinary places. I had sat in that same waiting room dozens of times over the years. I had read old magazines there, I had watched children play with the bead maze in the corner. I had waited there with William when his breathing became labored near the end of his life. But that day, every sound seemed louder. The receptionist answering the phone, the printer spitting out forms, the soft scrape of shoes against the tile floor. I kept thinking that somewhere behind the walls of that clinic were words my daughter had written about me. Words designed to turn my own doctor into a witness against me. Doctor. Mercer met us in a small consultation room instead of an examination room. There was a round table, 3 chairs, and a framed photograph of Lake Erie in winter. He closed the door, sat across from us, and placed a thick manila folder on the table. Rebecca, he said, I want to be clear about what happened. I am sharing these records because you signed the authorization, and because your attorney has requested them for your guardianship case. I nodded. My mouth had gone dry. There were 6 emails from Laura, he continued. They were sent over a period of about 7 weeks. Most were addressed to the clinic's general patient services account, but they were forwarded to our nursing supervisor, and eventually to me, because she repeatedly referenced your name and your care. He slid the first printed page toward me. I recognized Laura's email address immediately. The subject line said, Concern regarding my mother, Rebecca Clark. The message began politely. Hello. I'm worried my mother may be in early cognitive decline. She is proud and may hide it from her doctor. Please watch for signs that she gets confused, forgets details, or becomes defensive when questions are asked. I felt a small, painful twist in my chest. At first glance, it sounded reasonable. A worried daughter could have written it. A loving daughter could have written it. Then I read the second email. It had been sent 9 days later. I understand you cannot discuss her records with me. I'm not asking for confidential information. I'm asking that staff document concerning behavior if you see it. If she appears irritated, repeats herself, misses an appointment, or seems unclear about finances, please put it in her chart. It may be important later. I looked up at Dr. Mercer. She specifically mentioned finances. I said, Yes. He replied. Patricia reached for the next page before I could. The third email was longer. Laura described my garden fall as if I had wandered into traffic. She said I had recently misplaced important financial papers, which was not true. She claimed I had become suspicious and hostile whenever anyone discussed helping me. Then she wrote something that made my hands go numb. If she resists assistance, please note that resistance can be part of the condition. I am trying to protect her before she makes choices that cannot be undone. For several seconds, no one spoke. The room seemed to tilt around me. My daughter had prepared an answer for every defense I might make. If I trusted her, she could say I had agreed she needed control. If I questioned her, she could say my questions proved I was declining. If I became angry, she could call it agitation. If I refused to sign over my accounts, she could say I did not understand what I was doing. It was not concern. It was a script, and I was supposed to play the helpless mother in it. There is more. Dr. Mercer said quietly. He handed me the final email. This one had been sent 2 days before Laura filed the guardianship petition. It said, I know this sounds blunt, but I need the clinic to be honest. My mother has substantial retirement funds and a house, and she is vulnerable to being taken advantage of. I cannot protect her if no one will state that she is not thinking clearly. Please tell Dr. Mercer. I need him to document the pattern before the hearing. At the bottom, Laura had signed her full name. Not once in any of the 6 emails did she ask whether I needed help with groceries, transportation, medication, or companionship. Not once did she ask how I was feeling. She asked for documentation. She asked for a pattern. She asked medical professionals to view my ordinary reactions through a lens she had chosen before they even met with me. My eyes filled with tears, but I would not let them fall until I was alone. Did anyone put those things in my chart? I asked. Doctor. Mercer shook his head. No. Staff documented that your daughter contacted us and expressed concern, but no clinician adopted her claims as findings. Your medical record reflects your actual appointments, your cognitive screening results, your ability to describe your medications, and your capacity to make informed decisions. He opened another section of the file. After Laura's first message, I added a note to speak with you directly during your next visit. You did not show signs of cognitive impairment. You were oriented. You answered questions clearly. And you discussed your medical care appropriately. Patricia looked at him. Would you be willing to sign an affidavit stating that? Yes, he said, and I will testify if necessary. Then he leaned forward. I need you to understand something. Rebecca. Adult children are allowed to contact doctors with concerns. Sometimes those concerns are real. But asking a clinic to manufacture a conclusion is different from reporting a concern. No physician should decide that a patient has lost capacity because a relative wants access to her assets. For the first time since the petition arrived, I felt something inside me settle. Not disappear. Not heal. Settle. There was a difference. I was still hurt. I was still frightened of what Laura might do next. But I was no longer standing in the dark, wondering whether I had imagined the danger. The evidence had a shape now. And because it had a shape, I could face it. The hearing was held the following Thursday. The courthouse in Franklin County was older than it looked from the outside. Its stone steps were worn smooth in the middle, and its hallways smelled faintly of dust, old paper, and floor wax. I wore a dark green dress, low heels, and the gold pendant William had given me on our 25th anniversary. I had considered leaving the pendant at home. It was not worth much money. Just a small gold circle with a delicate leaf engraved in the center. But William had chosen it because he knew I loved trees. He said a leaf could look fragile and still survive storms. That morning, I needed to remember that. Thomas came down from Dayton and sat beside me in the gallery. Mrs. Dwyer came too, though I had told her she did not have to. She wore a purple cardigan and held my hand so tightly before the hearing that I laughed despite myself. You are not going in there alone, she said. When Laura entered the courtroom, she looked tired. For one brief, dangerous moment, I saw my little girl in her face. Not the woman who had written those emails. The little girl who had fallen asleep in the back seat after county fair fireworks. The teenager who wore my old cardigan to college because she said it smelled like home. The young mother who had placed her newborn daughter in my arms and whispered, "Now you know how much I love you." I wanted to reach for that memory. I wanted to use it as proof that there had been some misunderstanding. Then Laura looked at me and quickly looked away. And I understood that love could be real once and still be used badly later. The hearing began with routine matters. Namis. Case number. Appearances by counsel. The probate judge, Honorable Marjorie Keene, spoke in a measured voice. She explained that guardianship was a serious limitation on a person's rights and that the court had to evaluate the evidence carefully. Laura's attorney spoke first. He described Laura as a devoted daughter who had become concerned after my fall. He said she had observed memory lapses, financial vulnerability, and increasing resistance to assistance. He mentioned the clinic contact. He mentioned the proposed care plan. He said Laura was only seeking limited authority to protect me. Listening to him hurt. Not because he was cruel. He was not. He sounded professional. Reasonable. That was what made it so dangerous. A lie does not always shout. Sometimes it puts on a calm voice, carries a folder, and calls itself protection. Then Patricia stood. "Your Honor," she said. "Mrs. Clark does not object to concern. She objects to a petition built on concern that was manufactured, exaggerated, and directed toward financial control." She presented my recent account statements, the payment history on my utilities, my tax documents, my current medical records, the court evaluator's report, which stated that I was living safely, managing daily activities, understanding my finances, and expressing clear, consistent wishes. Celia Grant had also written something I would later read a dozen times. Mrs. Clark demonstrates intact decision-making, organized records, awareness of her financial circumstances, and a coherent understanding of the conflict with her daughter. Her objection to guardianship appears reasoned and supported by objective concerns. Then Patricia presented the retirement provider's records, the attempted email change, the attempt to add Laura as a trusted contact, the unsuccessful efforts to alter my online access. Laura's attorney objected to some of the documents at first, but the judge allowed them after Patricia explained that they came directly from the account provider and were being used to show the pattern of attempted involvement in my finances. Laura stared down at the table. Finally, Dr. Mercer was called. He walked to the witness stand in the same gray suit he had worn in the cold open, carrying the same sealed envelope. The courtroom became so quiet that I could hear someone turning a page in the back row. Patricia asked him about my medical history. "Doctor," she said, "have you observed signs that Rebecca Clark lacks the capacity to make medical or financial decisions?" "No, Doctor," Mercer said. "Have you diagnosed Mrs. Grady Clark with dementia, cognitive impairment, or any condition that would prevent her from managing her affairs?" "No." "Have you ever told Laura Bennett that Mrs. Clark required a guardian?" "No." Then Patricia handed him the printed emails. "Can you identify these?" "Yes. They are emails received by the clinic from Laura Bennett regarding Mrs. Clark." "Did they influence your professional assessment of Mrs. Clark?" "No. I reviewed them as collateral information, but I assessed Mrs. Bronis Clark directly." "Did the emails request that your clinic document specific negative observations?" "Yes." "Please explain." "Doctor." Mercer opened the first page. I did not look at Laura. I watched the judge. He read the lines slowly. The request to watch for confusion. The request to chart defensiveness. The instruction to note irritation as possible evidence. The reference to my finances and the upcoming hearing. When he read the sentence about needing the clinic to document the pattern, something changed in the courtroom. Not a gasp. Nothing so dramatic. Just a shift. The judge's face became still. Laura's attorney lowered his eyes. And Laura, for the first time that morning, looked directly at me. Her face was pale. "Miss Bennett," the judge said, "would you like to respond to these emails?" Laura stood. Her voice shook at first, then grew stronger. "I was scared," she said. "My mother fell. She wouldn't let me help her. She kept saying everything was fine. But it wasn't. I didn't know what else to do." The words landed hard because part of them were true. She had been scared. But fear was not the whole truth. Patricia asked permission to question her. "Laura," she said gently, "did you ask the clinic to document your mother's reactions to financial questions?" "I asked them to be observant." "Did you tell them that resistance to your assistance could be part of a condition?" "I was trying to explain what I was seeing." "Did you attempt to change the email address on your mother's retirement account?" Laura's face tightened. "I was trying to make sure she didn't miss important notices." "Without her permission?" "I had her information. I thought, did she give you permission?" Laura did not answer. Patricia waited. "No. Laura whispered. Did you prepare a care plan that proposed selling your mother's home? I was thinking ahead. Did that plan include $40,000 in caregiving reimbursement to you? Laura's eyes closed. For expenses, she said. I have expenses too. The judge leaned forward. What expenses? Ms. Bennett? Laura's attorney stood and asked for a brief recess. The judge granted it. During the recess, I sat on the wooden bench outside the courtroom and stared at my hands. Thomas sat beside me. Mrs. Dwyer rubbed slow circles on my back. I did not feel victorious. I felt sick, because I knew the answer before Laura gave it. When the hearing resumed, Laura's attorney informed the court that his client wished to amend her testimony. Laura returned to the stand. Her voice was lower now. She explained that her boutique business had failed. She had signed personal guarantees on inventory loans she could not repay. A lender had threatened legal action. She had fallen behind on rent, car payments, and several credit accounts. I thought if I became Mom's guardian, I could stabilize everything, she said. Everything? Judge Keene asked. Laura looked at the floor. My life? She said. The judge's voice remained calm. Were you planning to use your mother's assets to pay your own debts? No, Laura said quickly. But then she began crying. Not quietly. Not neatly. The kind of crying that comes when a lie has finally run out of room. I thought I could reimburse myself, she admitted. I thought I could get back what I spent helping her. And then I could figure out the rest. The rest? $40,000. My home. My pension. My right to decide whether I needed help. All of it had become the rest. Judge Keene took several minutes to explain her ruling. She denied Laura's petition for guardianship. She found no credible evidence that I lacked capacity. She cited the court evaluator's report, my medical records, Dr. Mercer's testimony, and my own organized financial documentation. She also stated that the emails raised significant concern regarding an effort to influence the clinical record for litigation purposes. She ordered the court file and related evidence referred to the county's Adult Protective Services Unit for review. She left it to the appropriate agencies to determine whether any further action was warranted. Finally, she ordered Laura to reimburse a portion of my legal fees because the court found that the petition had been pursued in a manner that was not in good faith. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Clark, she said, age does not erase autonomy. Needing occasional help does not mean surrendering one's rights. The court finds that you are capable of directing your own life. I wish I could say I felt triumph. Instead, I felt a deep, trembling relief. Not because Laura had been punished, because someone in authority had said aloud what I had been trying to protect all along. I was still myself. After the hearing, Laura approached me in the hallway. Her attorney had gone ahead. Thomas and Mrs. Dwyer stood several feet away, close enough that I did not feel alone. Laura looked smaller than I had ever seen her. I'm sorry, she said. I believed she was sorry in that moment. But I had learned that an apology was not the same thing as repair. You should be, I said. She wiped at her cheeks. I was desperate. I know. I didn't mean to hurt you. You asked strangers to write down that I was confused? You tried to enter my account. You planned to sell my home. You did hurt me. She began to cry again. I'm your daughter. Yes, I said. That is why it hurts this much. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Laura whispered, Can we fix this? I thought about the little girl she had been. I thought about the woman she had become. I thought about William, who always believed that people should be given room to tell the truth, but never given permission to keep doing harm. I hope you fix your life, I told her. But you will not fix it with my money, my house, or my freedom." She looked at me as though she had expected anger. I was not angry anymore. Not in the way I had been. I was clear. "I'm willing to speak to you with a counselor present." I said, "I'm willing to listen if you tell the truth, but you will not have access to my accounts. You will not make medical decisions for me. You will not come into my home without being invited." Laura nodded slowly. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. It was a boundary. And for the first time, I understood that boundaries were not walls built to punish people. They were doors with locks. They allowed you to decide who entered your life, and under what conditions. In the weeks that followed, Patricia helped me update my estate documents. I named Thomas as my financial power of attorney, only if I ever became truly unable to make decisions. I also named a professional fiduciary as a backup, because I did not want anyone I loved to feel entitled to control me. I added stronger security to my accounts. I placed a credit freeze in my name. I told my bank, my doctor's office, and my retirement provider that no information was to be shared with Laura without my written permission. Dr. Mercer's clinic added a note that outside reports from family members had to be clearly marked as unverified, unless supported by clinical evaluation. That mattered to me. I did not want another older person to walk into a clinic one day and find that someone else had been quietly building a case against them. Laura eventually attended counseling. I know because her counselor, with Laura's permission, sent me one short letter, saying Laura was participating consistently and working on financial accountability. I did not rush back into closeness. Once a month, we met at a coffee shop with a family therapist. Sometimes Laura talked. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes I said very little. Trust did not return because she said she was sorry. Trust returned, inch by inch, only when her actions stayed honest. One Sunday morning, nearly a year after the hearing, I stood at my kitchen sink, washing blueberries. The same place where I had once stood frozen after learning Laura had called my doctor's office. Outside, the maple tree William planted was tall enough now to shade half the porch. The bird feeder was full. The house was quiet. Not lonely. Quiet. I dried my hands and opened the drawer where I kept my important papers. The files were in order. My keys were on the hook. My phone was charged. My life was still mine. That may sound like a small thing, but after someone tries to take your voice, ordinary choices become sacred. Choosing what to eat. Choosing who to trust. Choosing when to rest. Choosing whether to open the door. I still loved my daughter. Love does not vanish simply because someone fails you. But I had finally learned that loving someone did not require me to hand them the keys to everything I had built. Dignity is not something other people give you when they decide you deserve it. It is something you protect, especially when someone tries to convince the world that you have forgotten how. If Rebecca's story moved you, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to remember that getting older does not mean giving up the right to be heard. And tell me in the comments, would you give a family member a second chance after betrayal? Or would you keep the door closed for good?